Good to see you, Marcus, and I think very interesting stuff. I did skim through the book, and my first question was actually going to be on mitochondria, but you took it already. So, I'm going to substitute it with a question about your shoes.
Okay.
So, interesting shoes. So tell us about those. I mean, I've seen them quite a lot, but I'm not sure how much they work.
I love these. So I've been a runner. I fell in love with running about 8 or 9 years ago, and I just find it to be an incredible discipline in life, not just to keep yourself physically active, but mentally sane, and then apply those lessons to all areas of our life, whether it's entrepreneurship or running a business, etc. And as I've fallen more and more in love with the sport, I've started to look at all the aspects that I can biohack on myself. And barefoot running has just been a really wonderful experience for me. So the roads in Bombay aren't conducive to just being barefoot all the time. So I've got these incredible things, and I run with them. This is my casual wear that I've started to wear with for the sort of non-running events. But it's so cool. It's they weigh less than 150 grams each, and it's like wearing a sock. Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad they work because I'm going to give it a try. So let's come back to what you were saying, right? So I had a couple of interesting conversations in the last few years. One with a gentleman who spoke about mRNA vaccines and how that's going to change the way that world works. And we had the head of Microsoft's Deep Learning Center talk about how deep learning could change the way medical diagnosis works, right? And of course, now when you talk about mitochondria, now we hear about all of these things, but when do we think that these are going to be mainstream? When do we move away from traditional therapy or traditional approaches to medicine or to health and see these kind of innovations coming in at a commercial level?
Well, I mean, the question for the room is: how many of you have had either the Pfizer how many of you have had the Pfizer vaccine here? Anyone? No, everyone's had the Covaxin and the Covishield. But in most of the rest of the world, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine is built on mRNA technology, right? So it's already become so commonplace. I think you're right. There's always a frontier. There's always a cutting edge. But the rate of acceleration and the penetration to the rest of society is just increasing. I know of young startups around the world who are doing CRISPR-Cas9 interventions out of their garage, right? That's how easy and accessible this technology has become. For a lot of the athletes that I look after, even like last week, I've got a whole body genome analysis done. I've completely studied their microbiome, so looking at stool-based changes. With IIT Bombay, literally 20 minutes after I finished the full marathon last Sunday, I was having a blood sample taken along with a lot of other runners, because for the first time in India, we are using a technique called mass spectrometry, which looks at molecules which are smaller than compounds in the blood, over 300 of them, and trying to infer what are the changes that have happened in the runner's mitochondria, both in terms of the fuel utilization, but also in terms of the energy expenditure and the inflammatory molecules and submolecules that it was being excreted into the bloodstream. So a lot of this is translating itself at such a rapid pace, and that's just on sort of the blood-based stuff. If you think about what's happening on the phone, so this ring that I wear on my finger is one of the most advanced sleep physiology devices that exists anywhere. I don't need to send patients to a sleep lab anymore. I can just get this ring online, put it on them, and I have everything from their body temperature, their resting heart rate, their heart rate variability, sleep phases, respiratory rate, oxygen saturations, and more, right? Glucose patches with all my pre-diabetics, and a lot of you may have seen that on social media these days. The watches tell us everything from aerobic fitness to zone trainings. I mean, it's incredible. You and I right now, we're creating 2 megabytes of data every second. Every single one of us in this room. 2 megabytes of data every second. And all of that, not all, the vast majority is being used to either recommend something you shouldn't eat, recommend someone you shouldn't date, recommend something you shouldn't watch. My dream is how can we use that data to uplift and optimize the human body and frame.
So tell us how, let's assume 5 years, 8 years down, 10 years down the line.
Yeah.
How is what you're looking at from the mitochondria perspective? How is it going to change lives of the average person, right?
Yeah.
You talk about, high performance athletes that you work with. But what about the average Joe? How is it going to change our lives?
No, great question. So 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago now, time goes much faster than we think. I founded a company called Human Edge, which is obviously named after the book. And we specifically work with some of the largest MNCs around the world. So over 50 global partners in 14 countries around the world. And our job as their well-being solution provider is understanding the data which is being generated, right? The last speaker, she spoke about a health index or a happiness index, right? So that's precisely what we do. We collect data on individuals, and this data is multifold. It could be their annualized blood checks that a lot of us take every year. It could be the wearable devices, which, by the way, 30% of white-collar workers own and wear a wearable device. It's a very, very large number. Or it could be very specifically designed lifestyle diagnostic instruments, questionnaires that we've built. And based on this data, we're able to understand the biology of an individual so that the program which is being customized for the organization is truly personalized for the individual. Because we don't live in a world where we need templatized solutions anymore. In the same way that we want choice in terms of what we eat, when we eat, what we watch, when we watch, we want to know what we should be doing for our lives, and that's what we're doing. So the mobile app is actually going live in March. If anyone wants to know more about it, they can obviously reach out to me. But our goal, our vision is really building a Siri-like system for health, wherein we can appreciate and understand the information and data on an individual and then create the right lifestyle plan for that person so that disease can be pushed out as long as possible.
So, obviously that's something that's going to excite a lot of people. But talk us through, each of the chapters, like you said in your book, talk about a feat of endurance, right? And you were also just telling me about, how you got the blood samples taken after the marathon. So talk us through about, what is it that happens to the human body and, how that, because, for example, last week I read a nugget which said, push yourself to your limits for 30 minutes a week, right? Try twice a week or thrice a week, push yourself to the limit in order to stay healthy, right? So obviously, these feats of endurance help the body. They help your body achieve much more. And John T. Rhodes, in the introduction to your book, talks about how it's made a difference to him. So tell us what what is it, the message that you're conveying in those chapters about the human body?
So the central message is that I just want us all to fall back in love with our biology, right? Let's forget about being so disconnected that this is the machine that nature gave us. It's not the mobile device. It's not the iPad. It's not all those things. Those things have greatly uplifted and helped us along the way. But the core machine that we need to take care of is our human body. So the different chapters looks at different environments as a way of trying to tell the story. In each chapter, there is the physical act being completed, which could be summiting a mountain or completing a marathon or going to Mars. But within that chapter, there is also a very specific physiological system which is being covered. For example, the chapter on summiting Mount Everest is all about your cardiovascular and respiratory system. So what is the role of oxygen in our body? How can we optimize the efforts of oxygen of what we want to achieve? And what are some of the advantages, frankly, of spending time at high altitude that we can apply to our day-to-day lives? The chapter on going to Mars is, frankly, all about gravity. We take it for granted, but we have all evolved in an environment where we are under the strain of one gravity on each of our cells, right? 9.8 meters per second, pulling us down to the center of the core. Now, when we send folks to the moon, that's a sixth of the gravity. When we send folks to Mars, that's a third of the gravity. And in the journey between there and here, we're in a weightless environment because of the pace and the distance from the planets. And this has a massive effect on our physiology, mainly our muscles and our bones. Now, all of these come back to the big thread, which is the chapters and ultimately leading to the mitochondria, is that what is it about longevity which is so interesting for us, right? As we get older, all of us, as we cross our 44th decade, we lose 1 to 3% of our muscle mass every single decade. For an astronaut, that's 1 to 3% every single month, by the way, right? That's how quick it is in space versus what's happening on Earth. And the reason why muscle mass and bone mass is so critical is because, as a physician, If someone falls over their 7th decade, so anyone over the age of 70 falls and breaks their hip, they have a 50% probability of being dead within 12 months. Not because of the fractured hip, because of the secondary consequences, which is either sepsis or pneumonia or a deep vein thrombosis or a pulmonary embolism, right? And the reason, therefore, that we need to look after our bones and muscles is because if we do fall, which inevitably we may, we need the architecture around that to be as strong. So in the young folks that I work with from their 3rd decade of life, we are investing in ensuring that they're using the gym, that their muscles are being optimized, that if they're a man, then we're looking at testosterone levels. If they're a woman, then we're looking at their testosterone and their estrogen and their follicular levels, et cetera, because the fuel we eat from proteins, the hormonal states, and the resistance that we train are all critical. So all of this connects back to that. Different physiological systems, different environments, elevating and optimizing health, but ultimately, how can we live life to its longest and fullest?
That's, of course, extremely interesting. So, obviously, this is a deeper insight about the content, about your work, right? But as an author, right, obviously you said that the book came first, and then obviously what you're doing now came. So how did you come about, what's the process that went through in your mind to say that, this is what I want to do now, and, communicate the ideas through this book? And having experience that you're saying that, now it's going into second round of publishing, right? Do we see more stuff forthcoming from you? And, what's that going to be about? And on a lighter note, of course, do we see a new company each time you write a book?
No to the last one, and I'm sure my investors will be very happy hearing that. No, so the book, as I shared, was a labor of love. Actually, my wife, after we got married, before we were even pregnant with our first child, she made a comment saying, why don't you at least pen down some of your experiences? Because it may be cool one day for our future kids to perhaps read something about their dad and see that, oh yeah, dad used to be cool one day. So I started to put these notes down, and I dedicated the book to my 2 kids, Aiden and Eva. And really my hope is that they fall in love with science in the same way, and hopefully through the words of their father. I mean, to me, that would be a pretty cool gift to give them. I was really fortunate. The Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, who we all now know because of COVID, and he's become a household name, he wrote the foreword of the book. And in there, he actually describes about this opportunity to inspire the next generation of scientists and biologists. Because as COVID has taught us, it's science and biology which ultimately allowed us all to even be, frankly, in the same room together, right? Remember, we were all not here. We would have been doing this on Zoom a few years ago. So I hope that this small piece of work can progress that agenda, inspire a new generation of scientists and biologists to create something new and grateful for the humankind. The second edition is going to have a little bit of a facelift. There is a little bit of new content which is being added to it. I have got a few more ideas, and I have been approached by publishing houses to write a sequel. But for any authors that's in the room, you can appreciate how big a journey that is and how much of yourself you have to invest in that effort. So it will come, but just not quite now.
Great, and we look forward to that. So, before we wrap up, any questions from the room? Yeah, we've got hands going up, yeah.
Dr. Marcus, thank you. And this brings me to one particular, long back I have read somewhere about that, as you started with, that everything is between my 2 ears, yeah? So they said that even there were days when people, without doing even exercise, by thinking that they are doing, and they used to tune in such a way that your body, they used to feel that they are doing some exercise, and they used to get trained. So this is just example what you mentioned, that how strong we can make it. So maybe from your side of view, I mean, because see, you are being a very experienced in this area. Do you think that this is still achievable and we can get into that level where we can think and, I mean, we can tune that way? I mean, I'm not saying overnight, but it takes time. But is that something is already there or going in, or some idea?
I mean, it's a great question, but it's also a loaded one, because what I fear is that someone may take the reference out of context and suddenly say, oh yeah, doc says you can lie down and just think about running and it's got the same effect. But look, what I'm fascinated about, honestly, and sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Manish Parikh.
Manish. What I'm fascinated, Manish, is that technology is now catching up and allowing us to understand the ancient wisdoms, whether it's the science of intermittent fasting, whether it's cold water immersion, whether it's heat therapy, whether it's, there's a whole bunch, yoga, breathing, vagal tone breathing, etc., etc. We live in a world where science is allowing us to catch up. So perhaps one day we may find that we can just sit back and dream about running the Mumbai Marathon and have the same effect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone in the
marathon.
room is dreaming that now. There's one
Thank
more
you.
question from that side.
Fascinating, Dr. Ranney. My two quick questions. One is, what is your view on resveratrol as an anti-aging substance? And secondly, how much of diseases are psychosomatic, or how much are something, they're hardwired?
Okay. So for the second one, I think generally across the board, there is always a psychological component to any disease. Even if the disease is purely organic in nature, let's take a common disease that probably a third of us in the room are challenged with, which is diabetes. Even though the disease is very organic, it's principally a disease of insulin, there is a psychological component that can alter the trajectory of how well that patient is experiencing and how well that patient is being managed. So whenever one sees a patient, that one must always think about the person holistically and what's going on around her as well in order to optimize the care. To answer your first question, and you mentioned resveratrol as an anti-aging supplement. So anyone familiar with Dr. David Sinclair's work at Harvard, he speaks a lot about the potential benefits of resveratrol as a anti-aging elixir. It principally acts via sirtuins, which is a mechanism involved in sort of DNA repair and some sort of mitochondrial synthesis as well. It also happens to be present in red wine, which is why about a decade or so ago, there was a big headline saying red wine can save the world and make you drink longer. Unfortunately, the concentration of resveratrol in red wine isn't as much that we may think, and you probably have to be drinking a lot of it, which will counteract the benefits of drinking it. Personally, I find that there are more effective molecules which are out there on market, but I'm not sure this is the right forum for me to be talking about drugs and pharmaceuticals. But I encourage anyone, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline about some of the medications that I take to try and extend my health span and the people that I care for as well.
All right, so fascinating conversation. Of course, when we talk about wine, the best cure for a hangover is not to stop drinking, right? So I'm sure as a doctor you wouldn't love it, but yeah.
Hang on, so now you've got us sitting and no running, and now you've got us drinking off. This is dangerous
I
for
think
my
it's a
job.
utopian session, right? Yeah. So anyways, wonderful, the ideas, the discussion, I think, thank you so much for that. And we hope to keep seeing you on our platforms again and again.
Absolutely. And there's some copies of the book outside, and I'm happy to sign some for anyone that might be wanted. So, but thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thanks.